The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinsky. That's Ralph Tomaselli, the editor of the Record Journal. Ralph, we're going to do a little public service announcement in view of Memorial Day, which is coming up at the end of the month. I'm going to start the show a little differently. My wife and I were in Hawaii a little while ago, took some photos. It's worth 50 seconds, so just bear with me. This is the video. 3, 2, 1, Bruce, hit it. It was obviously from Pearl Harbor, right. But Memorial Day is about more than that. So we have two special guests on the show to help us explain Memorial Day and what's going on in Wallingford. And let's get them on camera and thank them for coming on the show. George Messier, who is a member of the Veterans Memorial Committee. He's also the Veterans Affairs Officer at Town Hall. Mm-hmm. And Dave Gessert, also a member of the Veterans Memorial Committee. Guys, again, thanks for coming on the show. What's coming up for May 29, which is Memorial Day in Wallingford?
May 29th marks Memorial Day for Wallingford. It's a Monday, yeah. And we have our annual Memorial Day Parade, which begins at Dutton Park with a ceremony at 9 o'clock at Dutton Park, and then the parade proceeds starting around 9:50 or thereabouts, and it comes down North Main Street. And this year it's going to end up at the Town Hall, which is a slight departure from previous parades. Right. We're going to do that to take into account and to make note of the monuments en route, and that we have monuments, of course, at Dutton Park, one in front of the police station, and finally the monuments in front of Town Hall.
Dave, you've got marching bands, you've got public officials. What's the agenda? Who, if we want to go to the parade, and we do,
and you do.
You're slow.
No, I was just waiting for Dave.
What will we see?
First of all, thanks very much for having us.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's very youth-oriented. We're going to have kids that are involved in Little League, and we'll have marching bands from the four schools, Lyman Hall, Sheehan, Dag, and Moran, so they'll be there. We're going to have representatives of Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts present the wreaths this year for the first time on the monument, so that'll be a little bit different. And we're going to have rides for those veterans that need transportation. We're going to make sure everybody that wants to participate can, and there'll be a ride there for them. And we have two World War II veterans from Ashford Village. They're going to be parade marshal and deputy parade marshal. One's Army and one's Navy. So we're happy to have them.
So you guys are veterans. George, what's your service? And Dave, your service also?
For myself, Marine Corps, 21 years active service, and an additional 12 years teaching high school level ROTC, both in New York City and in Norwalk, Connecticut.
Yeah, Dave?
I did 6 years in Army Reserve and National Guard and military police.
Okay. Now, Memorial Day is Well, it goes back a long way, the history of Memorial Day, back to the Civil War days. What can you tell us about the history of Memorial Day?
The first official Memorial Day,
Yeah.
nationwide Memorial Day, was 1868. So
Okay.
this makes the 150th official Memorial Day observance in the country. There were Memorial Day observances before 1868 in various cities and towns in both North and South. With the folks would come out, and in those days it was called Decoration Day, which was an occasion for that, decorating the grave sites of fallen with flowers and so forth. And the name was later changed to Memorial Day, and it encompasses not just the Civil War dead, obviously, but we're speaking about the veterans from all the wars who have fallen in the service of the country.
Yeah, the reason why I played that video at the beginning, because Memorial Day, to my mind, is a way very solemn, and it's evolved into parades and things like that. But I think in the Civil War, more people died than in any other war, or someone said more than any war combined. I'm not sure about that, because then came World War II. But it's to commemorate the fallen, and that is an interesting juxtaposition that we have parades, which are very joyful. At the same time, there were millions and millions and millions of military men in arms that got shot, blown up, burned, and that's why I wanted to play that video, because it is, a solemn occasion. We got some, or can be, part of it, not all of it. We got some photos, Dave, we got from you from a few years ago. Let's put that first one up on the screen, Bruce, and Dave Gessert is going to, who's that handsome guy in the back? Who is he?
Looks like Mr. Koch is about ready to dispense with me there.
He's the guy in front?
Bill Koch is
Okay.
retired Sergeant Major, and he was part of the Legion Color Guard that year, and I guess I was checking up on him, and a few of the flags are there from the Color Guards.
So is that what you're going to look like on May 29?
Certainly, I hope to look like that May 29th. It's my plan.
Oh, my. And the next one. We got another slide there, Bruce. What's going on there?
That was the 102nd National Guard Infantry Band. So as one of our members of the committee belongs to that unit, was able to
Yeah.
arrange them for the parade.
All right, Fife and Drum Corps. We got one? Not on the photo, but I mean,
I don't know that there's a fife and drum corps
No.
at present. I think it's just the 4 school bands.
okay, good
This
enough,
year.
though.
But
Ralph?
Well, you talked about putting the day perspective, and when the parade ends, is there a ceremony?
well, we changed that
Okay.
a few years ago. Good point. What happened is we started out the ceremony at Dutton Park, and we didn't get weather like this. It was cold and damp. It was getting warm and warm and warm. And by the time we finished the parade, we would be down at Doolittle Park, and then we had to wait for the whole parade to catch up before we started the ceremony. We have people 90 years old, and then we have young people in bands, and the next thing you know, we look out and there's people passing out because of the heat. And somebody a few years ago said, wait a second, what if we do the ceremony at the beginning, when it's cooler, it's earlier, and the whole parade will be done early. We won't miss any of it. We'll do all of it, but the whole process will be done earlier. We won't have people passing out. We won't have people uncomfortable. And at the end of the parade, they can just take off and go on their picnic. So it was a major change, and it's worked out very well.
So if you want to see the ceremony, you need to go to Dutton Park at what time?
Starts at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
It starts at 9, and we ask the groups that are participating to be there at 8:30.
And then it ends at Town Hall, a keynote speaker, a guest speaker?
Not at Town Hall.
Where will that be?
That'll be at
Dutton
Dutton
Park.
Park.
Dutton Park?
And Dave
Okay.
is the Master of Ceremonies this year.
All right, and is there
Bob Parisi will be the main
the
speaker.
main speaker?
Yes.
And is there a church service connected with the event, the Memorial Day event?
There is a church service the evening before.
Okay.
It happens, and we move from church to church each year. It happens that this year it's going to be at Our Lady of Fatima Church at 6 o'clock on Sunday evening.
Okay.
And you talk about the solemn part. and
Yeah,
you
I
talk-
do,
And you
I
talked
know.
about decorating the graves and then the
Yeah.
parade being a little different. Part of the solemn part takes place on Saturday morning, when we go out and decorate the graves at all the cemeteries of all the veterans.
Yeah.
You see the little flags out there. We take up all the old ones and put down new flags at each grave, and different service posts go to different cemeteries to do that, and it's done on Saturday morning.
May 29,
Right.
9 o'clock, Dutton Park, that's the place to be.
Yes.
Thank you for your service on this project and your service to the country. We appreciate it, and it's always a great event, and we'll be there. Look
We're
forward to it.
looking for good weather and a good turnout, and
All right.
thank you
Thank you for
very much
hosting us.
for
You're welcome.
giving
Good
us
to
the
see you guys.
opportunity.
Good to see you
Great.
guys.
Thanks for
appreciate
coming
it.
on.
Yep.
Okay.
So a good segment, a little promotion for the Memorial Day
Absolutely.
event. It's a very big deal, a lot of effort goes into it, and Dave Gessert and George Messier put in a lot of time, as do a lot of the volunteers, and we didn't list everyone on the committee, but there's a lot of people that contribute to the success of this major Wallingford event, so, okay. Special guest in the studio for, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th time maybe over the years, Tom Laffin, the vice chair of the town council, the Wallingford Town Council. Thanks for coming back, Tom.
Thank you. And the Civil War comment you talked about, I think it's the most Americans have been killed because both sides were Americans. It's
Yes,
not all
thank you.
Yeah. So-
Thank you for editing that.
Right.
We want to talk about the budget primarily
Okay.
because, this is a big deal every year. It takes up all of April and part of May. This year it was, I think I sensed something special going on, but let's get to Tom Laffin right away. How do you view sort of the big picture, bottom line action on the budget?
A little better than last year, I
Oh.
guess. I don't know.
Walk us through why.
There was
Yeah.
slightly less chaos at the very final moments this year. And by chaos, I mean, and so in the meeting last night, I've in a lot of the meetings I've talked about chaos. I talked about it last year too. And Joe Marone talked about chaos being a lack of information. Chaos to me,
You mean during the meeting on video?
during the
on tape?
meeting, yeah, he said this during the meeting. You'll see it. It's on YouTube or whatever.
Okay.
The chaos to me last year and this year was an inconsistency in principle or ideology or follow through in the votes, and whether some people change their minds or realize that that they're not winning the war, or they haven't won the battle, so they're going to change sides to the war, and that's fine. And I've done that in the past too, and I noted that last night as well, actually, as did Councilor Marone and Letourneau. But when you look overall, so last year we had the failed budget because all these motions and everything were changed. The budget was changed with all these motions, and then at the end, like Councilor Fishbein didn't follow the path that everybody thought he was, and the budget failed. So this year, it was headed towards that, and that was the chaos that I was predicting all along, and that's where we ended up. But before we got to a failed budget, I worked with a couple people and Chairman Cervoni and the Comptroller's office, and we motioned to change or take out some of the changes that were going to ultimately lead in just chaos.
So a quick overview of the process. The mayor submits his proposed budget about April 1.
Right.
And then about all of April, these are rough numbers, the town council has workshops.
Right.
And they divide up the entire budget into, 5 or 6 nights or something like that, and they have a cluster of departments come in to each workshop, and the councilors have a chance to explore,
Right.
if they want, what's going on with those particular departments, the expenses or the revenues connected with that, and then the town council reserves one night shortly before the charter deadline to adopt a budget, which is the second Tuesday of May. It's by charter.
Right.
And if they don't do it, the mayor's budget goes into effect. The town council reserves one night to change what the mayor did, either to have the budget go up or go down, or the taxes go up or go down. And in theory, there's 9 different ideas and 9 different people making different motions or going in separate directions. It doesn't work out that way
Right.
in practice, but in theory, that could happen. And so the challenge is to marshal ideas that have enough support and put them into a coherent motion and make an amendment to the mayor's budget, and if all that fails, the mayor's budget goes into effect.
And-
Your thoughts, and then we'll get back to Tom.
Yeah, just real quickly.
Yeah.
And indeed, for the most part, the mayor's budget went into effect.
Yeah, Tom,
Okay.
is that,
That is correct, with a
Yeah.
change that was supplied by the administration for
Right.
employment variations
so- and-
since April 30th.
I'm sorry, Tom.
That's okay.
And then just one more piece of context, just so for Wallingford residents to know how their town differs from others. Unlike the other towns we cover that mostly have a town or city manager form of government, some of them have a board of finance, all of them have a city, some kind of a town council. There's usually a change. There's usually more changes to the chief executive's proposal. And
in
in the other towns that we cover, there's very robust discussion, dialogue, changes, suggestions, layers to this. Whereas my observation in Wallingford is that for the most part, well, I don't want to speak too loosely because different years have yielded certainly different, but
spit it out, I know
that
where you're
most,
going, I
for the
think.
most part,
Yeah.
it is the mayor's budget that
Okay.
passes, and there's some structural things that play to that, including the difficulty in changing or the mayor's budget.
Let's get Tom's
Yeah,
view
Ed,
of
I'm
that.
sorry.
What do you think of Ralph's observation, and is that a
No,
good thing or a bad thing in Wallingford?
He's
If
right,
you-
and I'm going to explain why
Okay,
I think
right,
it's
fine.
right.
Yeah,
So,
fine.
I think, one, when you look at the city managers versus an elected
Absolutely.
CEO of the town, so there is a sort of mandate that follows the mayor's budget versus a hired employee that is overseen by an elected mayor and a council kind of jointly in Meriden, let's say, as an
Right.
example. And then on top of that, we're going to throw in the second point is that Mayor Dickinson has been doing it this way for 30 years. So there's a certain validity to the process, a certain acknowledgement from a majority of the town. Sure, there's a negative, what's the word I'm looking for? A minority that doesn't like it, vocal or not.
There's a loyal opposition.
There's a loyal opposition. There we go. Where were you 3 minutes ago when I was trying to spit it out? There's a loyal opposition, but for the most part, he continuously gets elected without any real competition. And there has been some, but he gets elected. So there is a pause that comes to the rest of us that I often joke is that the mayor and the budget is not, and I say this with the technology stuff all the time, the mayor is not a variable in the equation. He is a constant. And if you continue to treat him like a variable, you may risk failure. So by acknowledging that there is a consistent constant here, we have to choose how to operate since then. And I mean that very in a kind of flip political standoff third person way, different from sitting there. From sitting there, I respect that. I respect the numbers. I respect the accomplishments. I respect the savings that we've procured and the bonding and the AAA bond rating and everything. But when you step back, I think at least you have to be able to look at it like that and just judge it as that, is that there is a consistent mandate from the town that we're kind of okay with the way that this goes. You know, we had a proposal, not a proposal, but it was discussed, and I've talked about it before, where why don't we just say, you know what, just lop off $2.8 million and you have to figure it out. It hasn't been done that way for 30-something years. And to a point, and I said this, and I've said this in a couple meetings now, if the council has one job, you know, we have a lot of jobs, but if we had one job, it's to pass the budget or to review the budget. And if we're just going to sit back and be like, you know what, we don't like the $121 increase per year, lop off $2.8 million a year budget on the revenue side and the expense side, go. If that was all we had to do, that seems somewhat irresponsible of me, from me.
Who is proposing this approach, though?
There's some members of the public that had discussed
okay.
it. And I had thought about it too. Why don't we just say,
Yeah.
just come in a couple $1 million less. Go figure it out. Go find it.
So you're responding not to...
I'm responding to my own
council's-
thoughts from over the years as well, because I agree in a way with how that could work with a city manager perspective, where you can say, you work for us, you go do this. In this case, it's a little different because he was hired by the same people that hired us. So I view, he's saying, these are my chips. What have you got? This is what I want to do. And I also struggle with the issue, and I've talked about this in my first year. I talked about when the council wanted to add additional dollars for technology, and I voted to remove it at the last second, and it came off. And my point was, like, we don't have to administer, we can't administer this budget. We actually don't have the authority to administer this budget. He has to deal with this. And if we are going to force a tax increase, there's $1,000. It's like pennies, per house, if you want to look at it like that. But we basically would be forcing this account money onto the mayor, and then he would just not spend it.
Yeah,
We can't administer it. There's
There's
a
some
lot
general
of places.
principles there that
Absolutely.
I want to get at,
Good.
but
Yep.
Tom raises a good point. You could add to the budget, a council could add expenses. When I say add to the budget, they could add additional monies to the budget. Mayor didn't have to spend it.
Right.
You could cut from the budget, but there's still enough money in the budget to do what the mayor wanted to do anyway. So you have all that. But Tom, I wanted to get a question in about the philosophy that you described. You said the mayor represents stability, he sort of goes first. Under your view of things, does that leave any room for the council to make any material changes, or are they there to go along, to get along, to approve it, and they really shouldn't weigh in too much?
No,
Is that your view?
It leaves room, philosophically,
Explain
structurally,
that,
and
yeah.
principle. Where the gray area comes in for me is that he's been doing it for 30 years. I made a joke in a meeting once. I said, there's a website that explains all this, and then one of the councilors got ready to write down. I said, it's www.themayorhasbeenmayor for30years.com. So it's at some point, you're like, well, wait a minute, and we've been doing well in a failing state, and with towns around us that are struggling.
Okay.
So it's a consideration, and I don't want to say it's all or entirely a political consideration. It's an operational consideration. It's an operational respect in that way. And every year, I sit down and I'm like, you know what, this year I'm going to find something to lop out, and I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to go through it. And it's just like, well, I don't want to reduce the number of police officers. I don't want to reduce by $400,000 the library's money, and it's like, where do you find it? And that ties into where I'm sure we're going, and where Councilor Zandri's motions were.
Well, yeah, you're right. Just so our viewers know, and we all know, because we kind of discussed it off camera, there were, 15 or so motions made Thursday night mainly by Jason Zandri to tinker with the budget in one way or another. And by going through some of these motions
Okay.
with Tom Laffin's help, we can sort of understand some of the stresses and strains of the budget-making process. And by going through this, they could be examples of ideas that garnered support, or, as Tom described, you're just here to show up. Tom, don't take me literally, you're just here to show up and approve, your thoughts.
Well, just that I want to,
Yeah.
that this.
Then we'll get to-
This, I think this meeting where these motions that we're going to go through took place.
Yeah.
Whatever else you say about the council's role, at least I read that they sat there for approximately 6 hours.
On the first night and 3 hours on
Right,
the
so,
night they got into the budget.
so whatever else,
Yeah.
whatever other opinions you have about what they did, they clearly put in the time. You can differ with the result,
I
but
don't want to spend too much time on this, but I got to say, 6 hours is too long.
a good,
You lose your
excellent point.
concentration, you
Good, okay.
get fatigued,
Good.
you lose track of the
Right.
numbers.
Right.
It is, members of the council have got to go up and go to the restroom, and they may lose the thread. It's too long. I don't know what the answer is,
Right.
but it's too much. But let me get to one of the early motions that was made. And this was a motion that was made by Chris Shortell, Tom, and it was seconded by you.
Yep.
And it reflects a governing philosophy, which is, to some degree, different than the mayor. So it's sort of striking that You were not on the mayor's reservation with this motion, which was
You
to
just blew
add-
people's minds, by the way.
I
There's
know.
people out there all over Facebook today that would just not believe what you just said, even though they saw it on video, but go ahead.
There's a motion to add money to the budget for, really for two police officers. Tom, do I have it right so far?
Yes.
Okay. And that motion failed. It was a 6-3 motion. We covered the police budget on the show briefly. We had some video of the presentation by Chief Wright, Police Chief
Right.
Wright. I forgot who our guest was on the show, but I think we had a guest. But I remember turning to you with a sharp remark that says, I don't see any public safety issue here. I don't see the need. What was the need for 2 more police officers that the mayor doesn't have to hire?
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
the little bit of history. So how this came up was during the police budget hearing. Councilor Shortell asked about how are you feeling about your quantity, your staff, and everything. So and again, we were told that resident to police officer, we're understaffed based on all the other averages and whatnot, and we should have like 14 more officers or something like that. And in the past, Chief D'Ortenzio would talk about how he would like to have 2 or 4 more officers, but because of the police academy situation in the state, it didn't matter if we granted him 1, 2, or 4, there wasn't going to be room within the year to hire them. So he was maintaining the current flow. Maybe he could fit 1 if he really tried, but it wasn't approved and he wasn't going to push it because it didn't matter. And that's
So
what he maintained.
why add money?
Right, and that's what Chief D'Ortenzio's argument was.
Chief
So,
Wright, yeah.
D'Ortenzio, because then we get to this year
Okay.
with Chief Wright, and so Councilor Shortell asks this question, and Chief Wright says, well, I was going to propose or request the addition of 2 officers, and then Governor Malloy's budget was announced. I saw the cuts coming to Wallingford, and I said, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna push it on. So he never actually formally requested that of the mayor. I don't know. The mayor said no when somebody asked him. It was never discussed beyond that. There was no reason, I guess, to think it would come up because it hadn't in the decade before. But it came up during this question and answer period. Councilor Shortell and I talked, off camera after the meeting over the couple days, and it was just something that kind of struck me where he wanted 2 more officers, and he didn't because of something going on in Hartford. And I wanted to throw that back out there. And for me, we know that that's a big deal. So I wanted to bring that up again, and I fully supported Councilor Shortell in that.
So there's only 3 of
endeavor.
you, though, so there were 6 that disagree with you. I mean, when I watched the video, I didn't see Chief Wright strongly arguing for 2 more officers as if there was a public safety need, and we mentioned this at the time we
Right.
saw the video. And I think every department head could say, yeah, I could use more help. We're down an engineer, we're down a
Right.
couple of operators in public works. I think they all could say that. I think a department head is sort of boxed in. If someone asks them, are you all set with your budget? Are you happy with your budget? Oh, yeah, I'm all set. It kind of suggests that maybe there's too much in the budget.
Yeah.
I think every department head, would be very reasonable in saying, we're pushed to the limit. We are
Right.
at our maximum. The mayor has pared down our budget. I could use some help. Yeah, I could, but I know we can't afford it. I mean, that's a speech that we hear. I don't want to beat this up too much, but just a final thought, but work through this thread.
Sure.
It seems like it's one of the,
There's a distinction between the initial hearing where he answered a couple questions,
Yeah.
the chief, and the actual motion came 2.5 weeks later.
Yes.
At a meeting where he wasn't
Yes,
present or
understood.
wasn't available.
we showed
to
the
attend.
video
So,
of
right.
his
So-
workshop presentation.
So yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
yeah.
we
It
showed that
wasn't
video.
discussed beyond the
But
question.
this is the kind of issue that often, not always, but often ends up in someone's campaign flyer or a negative ad or a positive ad, or it can be demagogued. You voted against public safety, and there's 6 town councilors
Right.
that could be vulnerable to that. You voted against public safety. The widows and orphans, you voted for more crime in the street. You didn't support the police. You didn't support the police budget when you had a chance to on May 4, 2017. It's a very emotional issue that can be used the wrong way.
And there's another layer to
I
it,
just needed
which
to say
is
that.
the issue of Wallingford has no police officers in the schools, and that's been discussed, and that can only be accomplished through additional officers.
Yeah, we've survived. You know I wasn't in favor of that.
No,
You were,
and I'm
we
not,
didn't agree.
right, I was, but,
Yeah.
and I'm not, but there
Yeah.
is another, even more political layer to this, potentially.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
That's why
And
we do the show.
These two officers, we stipulated, or we clarified, would not be resource officers.
Okay, there you go.
Would not be. These were going to be street officers.
Okay, here's my takeaway,
Okay.
then I want to move on. You had two Republican councilors, Laffin and Shortell, joining with Jason Zandri,
He joined us, for the record, but that's fine. Go ahead.
together going against a clear recommendation of the mayor. Obviously, the
Right.
mayor and Chief Wright worked this out, and you have, two of, I'm going to call them the establishment Republicans, Shortell and Laffin, going against the mayor's recommendation. And I thought, and this is a theme we're going to develop in the next 20 minutes, and that's somewhat striking, because we're going to see that
Okay.
maybe a pattern, sort of developing. Tom, circle back to that issue anytime you want, but I want to move on to the
I'm going to quote established Republicans as many times as I
establishment
can for the rest of the
Republicans.
night. Establishment
Republicans.
yeah.
And by the way, in the interest of full disclosure, Joe Marone is coming on at the end of the month. And Joe Marone, the Republican town councilor, didn't agree with Tom Laffin and some of the establishment Republicans on many of these motions. So we're going to get two sides
All right.
to this in time. There was another motion made by Jason Zandri, seconded by Benny Testa, and it seemed through this, based on just the materials, I haven't seen 9 hours of video, and I'm not gonna, that Jason Zandri and Benny Testa stuck together almost throughout. There might be an exception or two, but they stuck together. Is that your impression, that, was Vinny Testa vocal? Was he vocally supporting arguments by
Yeah, I
Jason,
don't-
or was Jason carrying the ball on these issues?
Jason made all the motions. Vinny made, I think, almost all the seconds. Craig made a couple.
Okay.
I want to say. Vinny usually expresses some sort of opinion or stance.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to say he just was nodding his head.
It
I don't
seemed like
think
the
he was
Jason
doing
and
that.
the Jason and Craig show, just from the reporting
Yeah.
and the motions. Would you?
Yeah, Jason, Councilor Zandri mentioned that he worked with Councilor Fishbein on drafting all of the motions.
Okay.
Now, Councilor Zandri made all the motions and led that effort on camera there, but he did reference that he worked sitting down with Councilor Fishbein on those.
So here's a big one. Motion made by Zandri, seconded by Testo, to increase the revenue brought in by property tax,
Right.
to increase that by $750,000 without increasing the mill rate. Tom, what's going on with the concept behind that motion and the concept held by those that opposed that
Sure.
motion? Give me both sides.
So the general, my take on the whole thing is that, where do our surpluses come from year after year? And it's typically not in the spending side, it's more on the revenue side, that we took in more money than we forecasted or that we projected in our budgets. The Comptroller Jim Bowes and the mayor, who have been a team for 12 years now or something like that, they have this system down. They use a certain percentile of what they forecast the actual intake's going to be based on these other equations of, what the property values are going to be and so on and so forth. It's hard, to them, it's a science, and to everybody else, it might seem arbitrary. So I think Councilor Zandri was trying to say, I think you're off usually, I want to bump that up.
What's the matter with that?
What's the matter with it is that, in my take, which was referencing what I referenced earlier, is that we aren't going to actually administer over the budget and have to deal with that issue, that end of it. Sure, if we're in a deficit, we're all going to look horrible and we're going to have to figure out where we're going to take the money from. But I think most of us are pretty comfortable with what is a very conservative take.
No
on
room
what
for
the
improvement
revenue
in
is
the
gonna
existing
be.
formula.
You could squish it up, but then it's within the last couple years. Before I was on the council, just before I was on the council, we ran a deficit. and, and some of that surplus money was spent to compensate for it, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So there's that lingers out there. Now, if that was like 15 or 20 years ago, that would be easier, but it was like 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. It's well, we ran a deficit by 100, 200, whatever $1,000 that year. So the estimate isn't foolproof. It's been wrong within
Well, we don't know if that deficit was caused by a wrong estimate on that line
It
item.
wasn't talked that much about, I guess.
Understood. Ralph?
See, I think this motion is different than the first one, because I think this motion, and I'm not agreeing with it,
Yes.
but just my analysis of it, this strikes to the constant theory about the mayor that Tom mentioned early on, that this is not public safety. This is how the mayor
Goes to
does
its
the
core,
budget. Goes to the core, he
core
must have just been.
principles. This is the
Right, and-
critical,
right.
the spine of it.
Right, and I'm not, right, it gets to the mayor's core competency. Can he estimate revenue and expenses? And it's no surprise to me that
Yeah.
the people, and I don't want to, I'll just foreshadow a little bit, the people that vote yes for this, for the most part, are people that have publicly clashed with the mayor on one thing or another. I'm not saying they've clashed with him on the budget.
Well, what's your point on that?
Well, I think if you're going to publicly, because I think this does very publicly question the mayor's competency, and I think that people who have done that in the past are much more comfortable doing that. I'm not agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, but
Okay.
you look at the yes votes here, and we can see people that, and the no votes, on the other hand, are people who, for the most part, I'm not saying they're not independent at times, but they've at least shown deference to the mayor when it's come to his job.
Right. Tom, keep your powder dry. I just want to get a thought out there. There have been complaints, there have been observations, they're not complaints, there have been observations for a long, long time, and when I was on the council, I made a lot of those observations. And they are absolutely correct by history and correct by data. There's no disputing the observations over the long trend.
Right.
These observations are absolutely more true than they are false, although there can be some variation year to year, and that is the mayor consistently, and he admittedly, underestimates revenues and overestimates expenses. Now, when you come to this revenue line, the revenue brought in by the mill rate, that seems to be more of a sacred cow, more sacrosanct than other line items of the budget. I got a slide to help me illustrate the point. It's slide 4, Bruce. If we could throw slide 4 up, and I did some math. You may have to get a little closer to your screen, but in order to compute the amount of taxes coming in with a given mill rate is not rocket science, it's not magic, it's not complicated. It can be reconstructed. And over the years, I've done that reconstruction.
Right.
And the mayor's error in forecasting on the property tax revenue coming in from a certain mill rate, the mayor's estimate has been consistently off
Agreed.
by a margin that is very predictable. So let me just walk through this math. The way you compute this is you just take the grand list that's available at Shelby Jackson's office, the assessor. You just get that list, and you multiply it by the mayor's proposed mill rate. And I did that math for you there on the screen. It gets you 120 million and change. You're not done yet because there's a collection rate, and the collection rate as found in the audits, and it's been around the 98.5. You could say, well, this year is going to be 98.4, or it's going to be 98.6. If that's your argument, I don't care, because it doesn't change the result that much. But I think you'll find if you go to the audit book and you find the historical collection rate, recently, 98.5 is very fair. And that means the amount of revenue that could be budgeted is this 118,694,332. If you apply that formula, which is fourth grade math, if you apply that formula going back year after year after year, you find out that formula is more reliable than the mayor's formula.
Right.
So I would take the position that using this formula is more accurate than the way the mayor budgets it. And so those that propose something similar to what Jason Zandri proposed, have a very excellent point. And it shouldn't be headed off by, well, that's accounting standards, we can't do that, or that's my line item. You know, the mayor saying, that's my line item. You can't trespass on that line item, that's too important. So what happened in the budget that was before the council the other night, the mayor included not 118,694, 332, but about $1 million less. He included in his budget $117,702,506. So the underestimate is about $1 million. I put an asterisk because there are some tax appeals out there. One of them is Bristol Myers. So I felt it important to put an asterisk out. But that's not going to alter it all that much. So those that are saying, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this revenue line item. Let's look at how much money is coming in with a given mill rate. Maybe we'll find a greater truth. I think that's a very fair point, regardless of which corner they come from.
I agree, it's a good
Tom,
point.
I use my oxygen, my available oxygen. We'll go to you.
Sure. No, I think part of it goes back to, this is the mayor's philosophy. This is the way that he's operated. People seem to be happy with it as well. The town is doing well. You know, we have a $160 million budget, $162 million budget. And yeah, you know, you talk, $1 million, $2 million. $2.8 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but it's a small percent of 162.
2.8 being the amount of revenue brought in by the new mill rate.
Correct.
That's what you were
Right,
referring to.
right. 2.8 was the number that we would have needed to find and cut in order to prevent a tax increase.
Right.
And part of the issue, a lot of the motions that came from last Thursday night, well, not all, not a lot, all came from the general government side, which is about a third. Nothing looked at the Board of Ed, which is about 60 to 65, 66% of the budget. So you're looking to take 2.8 million out of 1/3 instead of dividing that out over the entire 100% budget. So that's a factor as well. But no, the mayor has a philosophy, has an operation. This isn't like his second term. I think, you know, at some point you have to kind of step back and acknowledge that it seems to be working well.
Yeah.
And I'd rather side with caution than slash pension, health insurance, and other accounts just to kind of lop off the money.
So moving along on the motions, a motion was made to slash the amount being put into the budget for the pension fund. And here's the shock. That passed 8-1. A motion to slash the pension fund, $100,000, you know, it's substantial, but it was the mayor's number. You know, the amount of money that the mayor put in the budget to contribute to the pension fund each year, that's his number. And allegedly, he has this formula and these methods that are unknowable by us common folk.
Right.
Okay? So here you have this upstart council, 8-1, voting to slash the pension contribution, if these minutes are right.
No, they're not.
What happened? Was it 8-1 the other way?
These are draft minutes. It was the same vote as every other motion. So it would have been 5-4. Everything was 5-4 that night.
So this 8-1 that I have on my draft
Yeah, no, it's
motions
not
are
correct.
absolutely wrong?
Yeah, it's absolutely wrong. The health line, the pension budget vote
Okay.
mirrored the health budget vote, which is motion number 5
I'm
there.
going to strike this out and put a skull and crossbones on it, and anyone viewing should also, okay, we're going to
It's,
go on to the...
you know, on this minutes here, it says Fishbein was no and everybody else was yes. That sounds like your standard motion, you know, coming out of any other council meeting, but not this one.
Okay.
It mirrors it was Fishbein yes, Laffin no, Letourneau yes, Marone yes, Shortell no, Sullivan no, Testa yes, Zandri yes, Cervoni no, 5-4.
Right.
So, okay.
Which I think, Mike, just gets to my point that I'm not agreeing
Right.
with, but that only people who have publicly clashed with the mayor are going to vote publicly against his core competencies. You're not seeing people.
Well, I'm going to take, maybe be the foil for
yeah.
that, because anyone at any time should be able to
Absolutely.
to step up and not being assigned a political corner.
Agreed.
You're a clasher with the mayor?
Right. I'm just
You're in the wrong
analyzing the
corner.
vote. I'm not
Okay.
agreeing with it. I'm analyzing the vote, and I think what I'm trying to get across to people here
Right.
is, if you agree with these 5
Right.
and you want to change this, I think you got to do it at the ballot box at the top job. That's how to change these things. I don't have any, with all due respect to Tom,
Right.
I don't have any faith in the council's ability to change these things.
So here's how the pension works.
Good.
Here's how the pension works. And again, it's not the political corner that you come from that should be deciding whether or
Right.
not your view has merit.
Uh-huh.
Because a good idea could come from any corner of the room at any time, and each new idea has to be viewed on its merits rather than the group, of the speaker. So, but here's how the budget works, and this is why the budget is continually overfunded, based on information that I got when I was on the council, but it seems to be consistent. So there's an actuarial report, and the actuary who gets paid to sort of figure out how much will go into the pension plan is told to assume full staffing, and the town is never at full staffing. And so the mayor puts in a number, $6 million, $7 million based upon full staffing, and the town is never at full staffing. And so at the end of the year, and they say, oh, we had a pension contribution, a contribution to the town's pension trust based on full staffing, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars left
Agreed.
over because we weren't at full staffing. That is a legitimate angle.
Agreed.
A legitimate angle. And if you're looking to tighten up these overestimates of expenses and underestimates of revenue, it's that kind of a formula that needs to be ferreted out during workshops to say, Mayor, why were you wrong in your estimates in 2017, 16, 15, 14, 13? Why year after year after year after year are you off? And the mayor will say, well, haven't you listened to, Tom Laffin and Vinnie Cervoni? We're conservative budgeters, and this is our definition of conservatism. Tom?
Yeah, no, it's conservative budgeting. But you're right. A lot of these questions might get lightly touched or poked during the workshops.
Yeah.
But for the most part, this was the first time that they all came out. And I'm not criticizing that Councilor Zandri at some point said, well, I didn't have a lot of time, and it was a scramble to kind of get this. And there's a lot going on in everybody's lives. And that's not at all. And I said on the Thursday meeting, I said it last night, I said it in the newspaper, and I'll say it again tonight. I completely just, nod my head to Councilor Zandri for the effort, because I know he's coming from a good place. It's not about politics. He was just looking to do something different. And I don't necessarily agree with how he was going about it. I appreciated it. Going in, I wasn't sure what was going to come. I'm like, well, let's see. I just didn't agree with the way it was done. They are actuary numbers. They come from consultants. This and the health budget are basically the same, the
Yeah.
health insurance.
And based on more employees than the town reasonably
Yeah.
expects to have, and that's the fat.
And that's,
Absolutely.
That's the fat,
And
in part.
and I see that as an obligation. Like, this is our goal. We want to hire these positions. Now, the mayor said we are not planning to fill the director of program planning position. Like, those are things he's acknowledging now. But we're looking to fill these 2 positions to replace that, one part-time, one full-time, whatever the combination is. I don't even remember. So he says that now, if we don't hire that position by July 1st, if it doesn't get done till August or September or something happens, then all of a sudden that number starts to slip and be different. But I respect it. I would do the same thing if I had to actually sign my name to it, and I am signing my name to it. But if I was coming up with the numbers, I would want to say, this is the max. This is what I want to base the budget on. And the same thing goes for the health insurance. And Councilor Shortell, who works in the insurance industry, had the best breakdown, and I'm not going to even try. Just everybody go to YouTube and watch it, and explained why it's important to kind of do it this way. And all of that applies to the pension as well, in my opinion. And it does come down to conservative budgeting. And I get there was a group, or a faction that was looking to kind of force the hand, so that we would under budget we could change the revenue, and even if we had to spend this $100,000 in this motion for the pension, later on, that we would take it out of contingency. They kept saying we're going to take it out of contingency, but what we didn't talk about right now is that before this motion, and maybe it's just not reflected here, or we just glossed over it. They tried to reduce the contingency budget by $300,000. It's a $320,000 budget.
That's a weak motion and on
Right.
a $162 million budget, or for the town side, because the Board of Ed has its own contingency. So I wanted to move ahead rather than get into...
And that's fine. But what happened then
Yeah.
the rest of the night was, well, we have the contingency fund. And I'm
But
like,
it- but it's
you
gutted.
withdrew that
But it was
motion.
gutted, yeah,
Right, you
yeah.
tried to gut it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. So-
So I get that.
So there was if these minutes are right, there's a motion to decrease the health insurance, and that passed 5-4.
Yes.
So there is a division that doesn't break down by party line. Remember,
Absolutely.
party line is 7-2.
Right.
Basically. So this was 5-4. There's a division on the council that didn't appear before. And this health insurance is one of these sacrosanct lines, yet, if these minutes are right, 5 councilors voted to reduce that health insurance line. It was at $6 million category, down a little bit. There was something, a motion to eliminate the economic development consulting engineer. That was a 5-4. Again, this is not
It
what
was the
you'd
other way.
expect.
4 to 5.
4 to 5.
4-5.
That was
but
a-
the division, the close division
Yeah.
is my point.
And that motion actually comes down to an error in understanding of what that position was. It didn't come up for conversation earlier. That was budgeted in a
Right.
prior, it was a carryover. Eliminating that line would not have changed the mill rate or the increase. So that's why I think it was Marone flagged.
Buildings and grounds, the Public Works had some small cuts, and most of the council approved those small cuts. There was a lot of talk, and we're going to see if we can get this, Tom, in a short answer from you. A lot of talk
Good luck.
about bonding.
Bonding, yep.
About bonding. What was the concept advanced by Craig Fishbein and Jason Zandri, and what was the counter?
The concept was, let's bond this group of things, this large group of things from the capital and non-recurring budget. Let's bond all that instead
Instead of,
paying cash.
okay,
Or instead of budgeting it this way. And then let's go find some other money, not find other money, find other items to spend that cash on instead. But what it resulted in was bonding smaller items, that have a short life expectancy. And I'm consistent in that, and other counselors are as well, that, I don't want to be paying for something in 12, 15, 20 years that we replaced 7 years earlier.
Yeah.
And that's just my thing. And if somebody else wanted to do that and put it on a credit card, I have a problem with that. I appreciate the look, but it was the items that were pulled out, it didn't work that way. And some of that was paving. There was an effort to move money from the Public Works paving projects to parking lots. If I hear one major complaint consistent, it's that the streets could be paved a little bit better. And we're hitting 14, 18, 21 streets a year. I didn't want to remove or shift any money and change the bonding on any of that stuff to go to a parking lot versus a street. And that ultimately got removed. I think it was just one counselor that stuck to that at the end. But there's just the disagreement that we've had with the Board of Ed in prior years over what was bondable and what
Yeah.
was not.
So we've only got a few minutes left, but there's some general threads that I see if I can get to. It seems that this year, what's different from other years, is that there were some major areas of the budget where the votes were 5-4, indicating that 5 counselors are not at all, depending on the issue, not at all intimidated about
Right.
looking
Right.
at the budget and making changes. That the rock-solid Republican alliance has cracked, and you have some dissenting votes on some important items and on the formula that Mayor holds dear. Joe Marone, Craig Fishbein, teamed up on occasion with John Letourneau, Vin Testa, and Jason Zandri. That's 5. And there may be other Republican counselors that are holding their tongue and say, and I disagree with these numbers that the mayor puts out year after year after year after year, which are, we know, going to be wrong, and surpluses going up, and we're tired of the false choice. Would you rather be the city of Hartford? Would you rather be the state of Connecticut? Or if you don't want to be that, you got to be with Mayor Dickinson. And that's a false choice. It's a false equivalency. And it seems that, councilors are sort of tuning into the fact that, yeah, the numbers that they're looking at are wrong, and the fact that Mayor Dickinson is Mayor Dickinson in office for 30 years, the transferee of a good bond rating, because Mayor Bambaco had a good bond rating too, he handed it off. The mayor at least didn't squander it. But that seems to be sort of a new wind. Next year is going to be pretty interesting. And the question that I would have for Jason Zandri and others who would make amendments to the budget, do you use your time in budget workshops to ferret out the information you need to make motions on motion night? Or are you going to let all of that opportunity pass, a month of workshops go, without asking the personnel people, how did you compute the pension? Why was it wrong all these years? In 2017, 16, 15, 14, why was it wrong? Explain it. Why, what's the formula for insurance? Why were you wrong? Explain it and get the foundation, prepare yourself, and then make motions. That was not done this year, and frankly, it didn't go over well. It didn't go over with me. It didn't go over well. That these motions weren't supported with enough study. The other thing that I want to get in, and then we'll run out of time, we'll give Tom the last word. The notion that Jason Zandri was presenting a plan that would result in a flat mill rate was false from the start. Simple math would indicate that, fourth grade math would indicate that the new mill rate brought in 2.8 new tax dollars, and Jason and Craig Fishbein were only trying to cut 750, 2.9 million come in. They only want to cut 900,000. Even if all of Jason Zandri's motions passed, you'd still have a mill rate increase, maybe about a half a mil. Right. So this was sort of a doomed effort, right from the go, if the goal was to have no increase in the mill rate. Tom, you've got about a minute left.
Okay.
And we're not going to come back. This is going to be
This
your
is
final
it.
closing.
This is it.
Yeah, your
Okay.
final closing. Yeah.
The rock solid, the cracked rock solid establishment Republicans.
That's you.
Since I've been on the council, since I've been running for council, there's not some sort of this is the line, everybody's towing it. We didn't even meet this year. Everybody kind of has their sidebars. The Republican ticket anyway is united by a baseline ideology, and there are differences as you can see, and this time it extended to Councilor Marone, and more frequently it extends to Councilor Fishbein and then Letourneau occasionally, and Shortell, who openly stands against HSA issues and other technology and things
HSA,
like that too.
health savings accounts.
Yeah. So it's not like that, and I think that is actually part of the ticket or the party's success, is that we are at the end of the day individuals, and we elect a united chair, and that's kind of the big thing we gather around at the end. I don't think we're squandering. We joke about Bambaco had a good bond rating. Well, it was 30-something years ago. He did, but at what point do we stop saying, well, Bush did this 16 years ago, and this is his fault?
No, my only point was the AAA bond rating is not an answer to all questions.
No,
it doesn't end the debate.
And with your service on the council, with mine, with everybody else's, we do the best we can to keep going forward, and that's all I think that everybody wants to do. Well, you shouldn't have had the Memorial Day people on before me. You knew this. We do this without Ralph, and we run out of time.
Yeah, right.
You bring him back, and of course we're going to run out of time. It says 0. You give Joe Marone 2 episodes, another episode.
Joe Marone's going to have 10 minutes more.
Right, this is ridiculous. That's all right.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, as always,
You're
guys.
an excellent sport. Thanks for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday at 9 o'clock. If it's 9 tonight, it's Citizen Mike. Good night, everybody.